we would like to introduce you to different kind of methods of interpretation of cultural heritage within one of our currently at FHM conducted project. It's the project MICAT, and we would also like to highlight some practical aspects in the intersection to economic issues. First of all, what are the objectives of our project? It's about creating an elaboration of different kind of subtopics regarding European cultural heritage, for example, paintings, but also gastronomic tradition. In this relation, we are also identifying different needs for visitors, like the segmentation of different tourism markets, and also examining different examples of good practices regarding the interpretation methods of European cultural heritage. So all in all, we are creating something like a toolbox for students with different methods of interpretation for different subtopics of European cultural heritage. The lead partner in this project is the Economic University in Prague. Also involved are 5 different universities, like the University of Economics in Bratislava, the Fachhochschule des Mittelstands FHM in Germany, the Universitat Europea de Madrid, and also the University Alexandru Ioan Cuza in Iași, Romania, and also the University of Applied Science in Burgenland, Austria. First of all, we would like to explain very shortly what are different kinds of interpretations with some best practices, and then we will come back to our project MICAT, and we will highlight some central aspects. The first scientist who was concerned with the term of heritage interpretation was the social scientist Tilson, and he defined heritage interpretation as an educational activity which aims to reveal meanings and relationships through the use of original objects, which can be something like a gastronomic tradition, but also something like a painting or monument. For him, it was very important that this knowledge exchange is mainly driven by first-hand experience for the tourist or the recipient, and it's not so much about the communicating only about knowledge or factual information. So, also concerned with this term is the European Association for Heritage Interpretation, and they are more focusing on the link which has to be established between the visitor or tourist and what they can discover at a historical site, like a museum, for example. In this relation, methods of interpretation must ensure some central aspects, which is, of course, some transfer of knowledge, like the clarification of the relevance of a respective cultural heritage. And in this sense, there needs to be a link to the tourist, like to the previous knowledge of the tourist, but also some interests or values of the tourist. And if this link is established sustainable, it can be possible that you arouse something like curiosity for the visitor, and also you can ensure the satisfaction of some needs of the tourist. This different kind of interpretation methods must always create a link between the touristic attraction in form of a cultural heritage. For example, here you can see the East Frisian tea culture from Germany, and on the other side, the tourist with a special background. These methods of interpretation can be very traditional, like you all know, I think, something like a guided tour, which can be interesting or boring, depending on the guide. And on the other side, some new trends within technology, like augmented reality, where you have here the Eiffel Tower, and then you can scan with your smartphone a QR code, and then different kind of informations are presented at your mobile phone. And now we're coming to some examples from technology. You need to activate your microphone.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Giovanni Buono. It's for the introduction. I'm let's say an expert in project with an high content of technology, and I will show some example of how some of the new technology and the digital channel are used both as way to foster and to support the cultural heritage, and also provides in somehow some element of interpretation of this cultural heritage. So one of the examples that I will show you is the crowdfunding. If you don't know what is crowdfunding, basically is the merge of two words: crowd, which means people, a large amount of people, and funding, which means financing. So these are normally are digital platforms that are used to finance very different type of projects. So in this case, I will show you two examples. This is the first one, and this is for instance, a crowdfunding platform that normally is focused on a vertical, which is the real estate project. But in this particular case, this platform was used to finance the reconstruction of an old castle in a small town in the northwest of Italy, to transform this castle in a kind of condo hotel, which is a particular concept of a hotel where people can buy their house, living for a while, they'll spend some vacation, and then rent for the rest of the period of the year. But this was very important because this region is quite famous for the historical heritage, also for the wine, the food, and a lot of let's say an element of culture and monuments in this region. And actually, this project was also financed partially from public fund from the European Union. And this was, these funds were not enough. So the entrepreneur and the people participating to this project decided to use this platform to collect money to, let's say, recover this old castle. This is a way to support the heritage, the culture, but also it was used as a way of interpretation, because this project was showed during the month in this platform, and this platform was doing also a lot of digital marketing. So this was giving an opportunity to millions of people to access to these monuments, this region, and all the value that this project can give you to the society in general. Okay. Next, please. So, and the second project, it's important to make a difference. The first project, the people participate in this project finance this project in order to get some economic return. Okay, so they want to support sometimes the culture and the cultural heritage, but also they expect to receive some money back. And this is one type of crowdfunding. The second example, it's so-called donation crowdfunding. This means that the people who participate in this project normally do this without expecting any economic return, but just because they want to help the cultural heritage sustainability. And this is, for instance, an example of how this project is about not only the reconstruction of the city, but also the organizing of a folkloric event, which show the heritage in terms of the Christmas crepes, for instance, and gathering, also festivals where people in this town will showing a little bit all their cultural background. Okay, so next, please. Okay, this is another example of how technology can support directly the interpretation of cultural heritage, not the finance part. Here, this is a quite not super famous but very important museum dedicated to the architect Dali. This is a mix between a museum and a theater, so they not only expose craft work from the architect, but also they place some exposition and some shows related with the architect. The good thing of this project, it's the possibility to have a virtual visit, quite realistic. Basically, if you can see it on a mobile phone, on a computer, but also with some goggle or some virtual reality device, and the experience is super immersive. And this, you have the link if you can experience by yourself the visit. This is an example how you can use this to access to this type of cultural heritage in this period of the year with this COVID phenomenon, which make us very difficult to visit these kind of places, no? And basically this helped a lot this kind of initiatives. Okay, next. And finally, this is another way of interpretation, which is the organization of gathering. This week we see a very special festival organized in an Hungarian town, and you can see that this is put a lot of focus on the way how the children can access and the cultural heritage. And this is due to something that in this example I can see I can show you some analogic and some digital in the last picture on the bottom of the presentation on the right. You can see the digital version, but basically all this method is called gamification, which is the introduction of mechanisms like game and plays that, let's say, incentivize young people and children to interact with argument that normally can be very boring, no, for this kind of audience. So I think this was my last one, or okay. No, and there's the other one is another example. The last one. This is the last of my slides. This two examples of other way of interpretation, less related with the technology, but still they introduce some minimum element of technology, but especially an example of intangibles. No, like for instance the way how you people go with horses, or how the people have, for instance, some folkloric feast. These are also a way to address, let's say, the cultural heritage. No, you can see the link and you can explore by yourself. But these are all different methods of interpretation.
Okay. Coming back to our main focus at FHM, it's the gastronomic traditions. And as you all know, gastronomy and involved traditions are one of several mirrors that are also reflecting something like a lifestyle of a community or belief system. And this is an aspect which is not only examined within tourism science, but also within social psychology, for example. And within social psychology, we have a very well-established theory. It's the social identity approach. And you can say that somebody is sharing a social identity with a group of individuals who perceive themselves as members of the same category and share a certain degree of emotional attachment to this common self-definition. So it's something like social identity can be the membership in a sports team and a nationality, but also something that is imparted within a special tradition, for example. So we are focusing on the research question, how could gastronomic traditions be used to support a sustainable tourism development? First of all, we had to find something like a definition. What are gastronomic traditions? And we found none. So there's nothing like a common understanding which central aspects must have a gastronomic traditions to be named like a tradition. So we tried to find something in the area of traditional food. And even in this context, we also didn't find something like a common understanding. So there are different terms used as synonyms like local food, for example, or regional food. And there's a research group around Van Honecker et al. And they tried to ask consumers from diverse nations like Italy or Spain, for example, how they would try to define something like a traditional food. And through some correspondence analysis, they found a definition like a traditional food product is a product which is associated to specific celebrations like seasons, or if you're thinking about Christmas or Easter, is transmitted from one generation to another, made in a very specific way, according to gastronomic heritage, is naturally processed and distinguished and known because of its sensory properties, and very central is the aspect that it is associated to a certain region, for example, or community. Even for our project, this definition was a little bit too short. So we had to integrate different aspects. Of course, traditional foods are very important in this relation, but also beverages, methods of preparations, also vessels for preparation, and of course also traditions, why consuming food, like some special seating arrangements or also some cultural taboos regarding nutrition, what you shouldn't eat, for example, within a given culture, because it can be also something like an indicator for something like a basic belief system or values within the community. There were different aspects and examples which are already recognized by UNESCO as intangible heritage. For example, the pizza from Naples, like it's not only about the product, but also about the preparation of the meal, and also, of course, about the exchange between different generations while consuming the food. Here you can think maybe about some method of interpretation, like something like a workshop, for example. A very different example from Germany, it's the German bread. We have about more than 2,000 different kinds of bread. And this example is from the Museum of Bread and Art from Ulm, where we have something like a very traditional part where you can join workshops, you can bake your own bread regarding to special seasons like Easter, for example, and there's a different part added. It's more about interpretation of a relationship between nutrition and humans through painting. So you can find in this museum, for example, also paintings from Picasso or Rembrandt. And last but not least, very different kind of interpretation method is dairy food from Norway, Malarove. It's a salted, smoked and boiled sheep's head, and it's from the former tradition within Norway that it was common to eat every eatable part of the animal because of a lack of resources. And due to the growth in general well-being, this former tradition almost disappeared within Norway, except for a special region within Norway, it's Voss, and they tried to use this sheep's head to make a branding for the destination. So it's not so much about the former purpose to use every eatable part of the sheep. It's more about really branding a destination regarding this special food event. So there are different products like earrings around the sheep's head, glasses. There's a hotel that is specialized for the preparing of this dish. And also there's something like an annual sheep head release where you can compete with tourists from all over the world who can eat the most sheep's head while the sheep is looking directly in your eyes, because the eyes aren't removed while preparing this dish. Of course, this method of interpretation is not very sustainable because there's only one farmer who's producing more than 60,000 heads a year, and not every part of the animal is really used afterwards. So what are the opportunities through interpretation of different kind of cultural heritage within tourism in the sense of sustainability? Of course, if you're thinking about the sheep's head, it has the potential to attract, for example, new tourist segments, like maybe younger tourists who wouldn't be primarily motivated by cultural heritage to travel to a given destination. Also, you can foster job security, for example, and also there's a link to the branding of a touristic destination, for example. If you implement these methods of interpretation sustainable, it could be also possible to create something like a very authentic holiday experience for the tourists, of course, and it could be also a way to create new jobs if you're thinking about involving directly the regional population within this interpretation process. Coming back to the project MICAT, it's founded by the European Commission, and it has a duration about 3 years. Now we are coming to the last part of the project. We had different kind of working packages. So first of all, we had to make sure that the product of the project would be implemented sustainable at different universities within Europe. So this module will be implemented, for example, in Prague, Madrid, Bratislava, Schwerin, Iași, and Eisenstadt. And the second output was the MICAT handbook. It's even about the different subtopics of European cultural heritage. It's about the methods of interpretation, but of course also about some transfer strategies for different tourism markets. This handbook is complete, freely consumable, so you can read it even if you're not a student at one of these universities. And last but not least, we have the MICAT guidelines. And the MICAT guidelines, they are more being developed for companies who are directly involved in the tourism industry. So it's more about the actual implementation of these methods of interpretation within the economy. There's a focus, for example, on best practices, but also on market segmentation and event management. Every university had a different focus. For example, the Czech Republic was concerned with architecture and monuments. Slovakia was dealing more with local traditions. Romania was focusing on pilgrims, for example. Austria was dealing more with music and festivals in this area. And Spain was focusing on fine art, and we had the focus on gastronomic and culinary traditions at FHM. So where can we find some intersections of MICAT, and especially on the interpretation of gastronomic traditions to different areas within tourism? Of course, there's an intersection to gastronomic cultural tourism, like, for example, adventure tourism. Again, Smalahov from Norway could be an example for this, but also the area of wine tourism or gourmet tourism. And there's also a relation to cultural heritage tourism, so the tourists can directly participate on traditions of the past through some presentations, festivals, of course, workshops, activities, and tastings. Also, it could be possible if we're looking at ecotourism, that tourists could directly visit some farms. They could participate in the everyday agriculture life, like the harvesting work, for example. And it is also possible to consume the food produced at the farms directly on the farms. And last but not least, we have a very clear intersection to sustainable tourism. So it is possible through these methods of interpretation to foster the promotion of active participation in the relevant culture of the destination. So the tourists can join the regional cuisine, for example. You can foster jobs for the local population, for example. You can also generate income within the destination. And if you implement these methods of interpretation sustainable, it's also possible to promote something like a better understanding of the regional culture for the tourists. And last but not least, sustainable is also very important within the project. We have some competence exchanges on a regular basis within the lecturer of the study program through some joint staff training measures, for example. We are also fostering the internalization of the module and the mobility, both for the students and the lecturer. And all in all, we are creating something like a toolbox with different methods of interpretation that can be used by our students in diverse contexts. And also we're trying to develop something like a methodology competence for our students, so we will be able to adapt these methods of interpretation to diverse tourism markets. And we will have a final conference, sadly not in May, but we will find a digital solution soon, I guess. So thanks for your attention.